This page is inspired by my favorite poem from Shel Silverstein called Sick. It's about a little girl who doesn't want to go to school. I used some watercolor paper and some spritz of paint. I did use the Tim Holtz Distress spray, which activates with water. I love the way it spreads all over the page. I did use a blow dryer, and I also used a napkin to dab up the excess so that I could get it to dry faster. In the art journaling prompt this month, I asked my students to use at least 3 circles and 2 straight lines. So I'm cutting some strips into this watercolor paper to become my straight lines on my page. Next, I'm using a hole punch, and I will punch out varying size circles. Actually, I end up using this little piece of paper that has those 3 small circles on it later on. So I rarely mention this, but I do often glue 2 pages together, and as you can see, I do not do it very neatly at all. I just throw some glue on there, brush it, and pat the pages together. That's good enough. It's an art journal. It's not a piece of art that we're selling. I chose to paint the background of this page in black because of the Shel Silverstein poems are all done in black and white. So I thought initially I was going to mimic that. As my art journal progressed, the color scheme changed. I do want to mention that I printed my poem out on just plain copy paper, so it wasn't super translucent when I decoupaged. If you're using a really thin paper, you want to have a light background because your paper is going to go translucent when you add that medium to it. So if your background isn't light and it's black like this, all of that black would show through, and we don't want that. But thankfully, my paper was thick enough that that didn't happen. So here's that piece of paper that I was telling you about that I had those 3 holes punched out on the right side. I simply drew some straight lines in with a pen and a ruler. As I'm gluing my papers down, I realized I need a different decoupage medium. Okay, I didn't really need that much medium. It's okay, I'll fix it later. Okay, I want you to notice that I'm using those strips that I made earlier. So I'm getting my 2 straight lines in for sure. I'm doing more than 2 straight lines on the whole page, but I layered those. And then I'm going to start adding some circles. This little tiny circle that you see, that was punched out of a magazine from a pattern. It's a black and white pattern. And that went along with what I thought was going to be my color scheme of black and white. The reason I switched decoupage mediums earlier was because I needed something else to work with the thicker paper, but I also needed something that wouldn't dull the metallic finish that I had sprayed on these pages earlier. The Pen Tart decoupage medium was a matte finish, but now I'm using the Wise Owl 1 Hour Enamel Clear in semi-gloss. So I used a paper towel to sop up all that extra varnish. Okay, now I want to bring both of my pages together, and I'm going to use the Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paint in Isles Avenue to do that. You'll see me brushing it on, but I'm also going to use my hands. I like to be tactile with my pages, and this gives me more control. I can highlight some areas and put a bit more intensity of paint in a certain area than another. So I used some of the Pen Tart Loft Spackle and mixed it in with the Wise Owl Metallic paint in Gold Dust, and now I'm going to run it through the stencil. Mixing the Loft Spackle in with the metallic paint took the sheen down off of the metallic, and I would use something different in the future. It's one of the reasons why I like salt wash so much, because it doesn't change the color of your paint. Okay, here's real time with sound. I'm putting some product on the back of my palette knife, and I'm going to use about a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to scrape that product across that stencil. I'm really trying to pull product from one area to the next so that I use up all my product, or at least most of it. Okay, you can see where I got some of the spackle over my black and white circle, and I just wiped it off. One of the reasons I could do that was because I used that semi-gloss 1 Hour Enamel Clear. Now I'm adding a little bit more of the spackle just in random areas on my page. Okay, y'all know I hate to clean brushes, but we need to clean this stencil immediately so that that spackle doesn't harden on there and never come off. Just use a spritz of water and a towel and wipe one side, and then flip it over, do the same thing, but you'll have to do it multiple times so that you get all of the product off. Okay, and I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer so that I can speed up that drying process so I can go ahead and move on to the next steps. Now, I don't want to use my entire poem because it's very long, so I'm just going to take out some of the lines that I really like, especially the beginning of the poem. I would love to be able to give you a reason why I arrange things in a certain order, but I can't. It's just very intuitive. I do play around with the composition before I glue anything down. I personally prefer a torn edge instead of just simply cutting, but that's simply personal preference, so you do you. I like to use recycled materials whenever possible, so this is the facing sheet of a piece of cardboard that you just kind of rip off the top. I like the contrast between the white paper and the brown of the cardboard. I did use the Stays On Timber Brown ink to go around all of the white sheets of paper, but I decided I really liked the gold on the cardboard, and here's a little close-up of it. I started to do it on the first white page, but it just wasn't showing up enough. I really do prefer the details in this page than I do even the overall 2-page spread, but sometimes that happens. I really wanted to delete all of this gluing down the lines of the poem and inking up the edges, but I wanted you to see that at one point on the right side I do change my arrangement. It was just intuitive. It was something that I liked better, so don't be afraid to change something even though you've made a decision initially. It's okay to change your mind. I ended up changing my mind at the very beginning about the color scheme because I liked the watercolor paper that I had made, and I decided to run with that. So the reason why I chose this poem was because it was read to me whenever I was a child, and we actually performed it in our talent show. It may actually have been some kind of year-end school presentation, but it made a huge impression on me. The next thing that I ended up doing was just taking a pen and doing some mark making. I began by tracing the sketch at the bottom of the page and just outlining what was there. And then I decided to make some sort of squiggly lines around all of the words. I went in and added a little bit of extra mark making on some of the circles, some of the other items that I had decoupaged down. I will end up going and making some marks in all of the corners. This is one of those things where you just have to decide what is enough. I can't really tell you what that is. I know I reached a point where I said, okay, that's enough, and I'm going to take a break. And guess what I did after that? I came back to finish off the page, and I recorded it, but the camera was facing the wrong way. So I'm going to try to tell you what I did to finish off the page. Basically, it was inking the edges, and then I know I did some stamping with some of the gold ink pad, but it didn't show up a whole lot, but it did fill in some of those blank spaces. Like this one right here, you can see that tiny little flower there. You can also see in the top right corner how dark it is. I did some drippy paint in there, and I added a bunch of dark ink around all of the edges of the pages. I know I used some gilding wax over the stencil, but in the end I came back with some white paint on a makeup sponge and went over those raised stenciled areas and also came back with some more ink. I felt like if I hadn't have done that, they were going to blend into the background too much. And my final step was to add some white paint splatter. I did cover up the lines of the poem so that any of the splatter wouldn't make it difficult to read. My apologies again for not recording that last section. I know it's difficult to understand what I mean whenever you can't see it. But I hope this inspires you to take your favorite poem or a book title and create your own page. And if you're not familiar with Shel Silverstein's poem Sick, it starts out with, "I cannot go to school today," said little Peggy Ann McKay. "I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps." And she goes on and on and on about all the problems that she has and why she can't go to school. And then she finds out it's Saturday, and then she's going to go out and play. So please have a play in your art journal today.